Normal life has returned to its normal pace, despite the fact that a year has passed since the end of the war. Tourist police keeping an eye on visitors in Moscow, even though they are being observed by policemen who are known as the tourist police. It appears that the people who pack up restaurants and pubs in Moscow, especially on the weekends, are having a good time. Visitors to the city often tour the city's historical churches with the assistance of tour. Even if there is a war going on, people are still getting engaged, getting married, and celebrating. As a great number of Western brands were banned from the country, the Russian adaptations of these goods started appearing on store shelves instead, taking advantage of the war. A number of countries expanded their trading relations with Russia. There aren't many indications that the country is now engaged in a. Sometimes the letter Z, the sign of the occupation of Ukraine, which Russia defines as a special military operation, may be seen prominently displayed on the facade of a building. Other times the letter Z can be seen prominently displayed on the shutter of a Western store that has ceased trading. Russia's silencing opponent. Russia, like the rest of the world, is experiencing the reverberating repercussions of the conflict. On the other hand, the government of Russia is working hard to remove all signs of this. The Russians who do not want Putin discuss the war in private despite the fact that it is painful. In spite of the fact that the number of people killed in the conflict is estimated to be in the tens of thousands, the government continues its campaign of broad repression. Political opponents were either put in jail or forced to flee the country. Ayahi was given a sentence of 8.5 years. Vladimir Karameza is currently awaiting trial in prison and Alex Navalny is still being held behind. Those who demonstrated against the war were quickly fired from their professions and performances of plays and concerts were cancelled. Those who took to the streets to oppose the war were taken into custody almost immediately. Protesters who use the term war on their banners risk receiving large fines because it is against the law to refer to a special operation. As war, Russia initiated a military operation directed at the demonstrators who were protesting. These activists were taken into custody by the police and each of them was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Putin's repression of the Russian media in Russia. There is now no longer any independent media. Hate speech directed towards Western countries is shown on Russian state television. The reassuring messages that the majority of the world is on Russia's side are spread through the media that Putin's supporters support. According to Denisov, director of Russia's largest research company, Levada Center, the Russian people are affected by the news that is generated by the pro-Putin Russian media. The concept that NATO wants to destroy, or at the very least weaken Russia, has been widespread for 3/4 of those polled for many years. Vodka. The idea that NATO wants to destroy, or at the very least weaken Russia has been prevalent. On the other side, access to social media and websites that publish independent news is restricted. One of the most prominent radio stations was shut down the license for the newspaper. Nova Gazeta, which is run by Dmitry Madov, laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, has been rev. In schools, children and teenagers are being exposed. The propaganda, the Kremlin uses the youth to spread its own brand of discourse. Conversations about important matters is the name of the new class that was introduced to the school's curriculum in the month of September. Students in the 8th and 11th grades will learn about Russia's unique mission to construct a multipolar world order through the lesson plan that has been. It is common knowledge that educators who refused to instruct students in this course were terminated from their positions. According to what has been reported, the school administration or the police exert pressure on the parents of pupils who do not attend the class, even though it is not a requirement for them to do so. On the other side, teachers frequently provide classroom assignments to their students that require them to write letters to service members. It has been requested of certain educational institutions that they create a hero section for their former students who served in Ukraine. How effective were the sanctions imposed against Russia? The Russian economy, which has been hit hard by sanctions, has performed better than expected, thanks to record oil receipts of roughly $325 billion after energy prices were. By increasing interest rates, the Central Bank of Russia was able to stop the ruble from depreciating further, and now the ruble is more valuable relative to the dollar than it was before the invasion. A large number of Western corporations, including McDonald's, IKEA, Apple, and others have left the Russian market. McDonald's was rebranded as Kunowica Flavor Point, and Starbucks changed its name to Stars Coffee. Apple's, MacBooks and iPhones can still be purchased easily while locals in Moscow claim that restaurants stock goldfish, Spanish cheese and French wine. In spite of the fact that payment networks Visa and MasterCard stopped offering their services in the country, current credit cards were still able to be used in the country since banks moved to using the regional Mir. Cash is still the preferred method of payment for anyone venturing outside of their home country because the Mir system has been phased out in many nations. The European Union's ban on flights from Russia led to an increase in the cost of plane tickets and made it more difficult to travel to various locations. Those in privileged socioeconomic positions can now go overseas for vacation. According to sociologists, the majority of Russians whose average monthly pay is approximately $900 in 2022 are not bothered by these developments. Passports are only held by 1/3 of the population at most. utmost. Putin raises. In response to a spike in inflation of about 12%. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, announced new benefits for families with children as well as increases of 10% in both pensions and the minimum wage. Yeah, it's a little more expensive, but it's okay. A Russian citizen who asked not to be recognized for safety reasons noted, sure, it's a little more. On the other hand, the Russian citizen claims that the war has angered the population. Mobilization adversely impact the Russian families. In September, the Kremlin issued a summons for 300,000 reserve soldiers to report for duty in the army. This caused widespread panic throughout Within a matter of hours, all available seats on international flights were taken and lengthy lines formed at Russia's entry points. After the mobilization, it is thought that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people fled the nation. The enlisted personnel are dissatisfied with the living conditions and the lack of equipment at the base. Many families report that their loved ones who were deployed to the front lines without receiving adequate training or equipment were quickly killed or wounded. It was so difficult that I was afraid I was going crazy. For the first time since World War II, the mobilization of reservists has caused family members to be separated and sent to different locations. A lady who objected to her husband's enlistment in the military detailed the difficulty she had as a result of being forced to suddenly take care of her children as well as her husband's ailing mother. That was such a struggle. I was terrified that I was going to completely hallucinate. The woman made her statement under the stipulation that her name would not be made public while the investigation into her case is ongoing. She explained that her husband, who had been away on leave, had returned homesick with pneumonia and required psychiatric assistance because he was overly sensitive to any kind of loud noise. The fear of a new mobilization is persisting among the Russian. In spite of these experiences, OVV, the proprietor of the survey company, noted that the general sentiment among Russians was that the war was far away and did not directly touch us in any manner. According to OVV, many avoided being sent to war, while others dreaded that the Kremlin would announce a new mobilization. Both of these scenarios were a result of the same anxiety. He says that he is thankful to God and that we should continue living our lives. Conflict and fatalities. The reality of war is brought home to families when they learn that a member of their family who served at the front has been killed in action. These families bear the brunt of the conflict after the sinking of the battleship that was part of the Russian fleet. In April, the Russian mother who made a statement said that she could not hear from her son, and that the pain of this separation is into. The mother, who does not wish to reveal her identity, reveals that she does not want to accept the fact that her kid has passed away. On the other hand, photos of Putin attempting to console a number of mothers of service members are aired on television. The Russian Ministry of Defense estimated that little more than 6,000 people had lost their lives, but Western experts indicate that the number is significantly greater than. Putin assured the relatives of individuals on the list of people who were murdered in the fighting that they would receive compensation. This money was initially distributed to various families. Putin is planning to make another attempt on February 24th. It has been rumored that Vladimir Putin will launch a huge strike with his army on February 24th, which marks the anniversary of the. After going a whole year without achieving much, Putin might decide to strike Kiev in an effort to win back the favor of the Russian people. But the Ukrainian soldiers who are currently serving at the front are battling valiantly. The outcome of the battle for the city of Bakhmut, which is defended by a sizable contingent of Ukrainian troops, is currently in the balance. Drones and howitzer fire onto Russian forces who are directly attacking the city, as well as those who are attempting to infiltrate the forest. During the course of the previous day and a half, the Ukrainian army set up an ambush for Russian soldiers who were attempting to enter the city of Bakhmut from the surrounding woodland. The region came under attack from Ukrainian tanks and howitzers. The fleeing Russian soldiers were targeted by bombs dropped from drone. The HAMS missile system, which was manufactured in the United States and has the Nick moniker, the tank killer, eliminates vulnerable Russian tanks, one at a time. Pictures showing the destruction of thousands of Russian tanks on the front were circulated across various social media platforms. According to those knowledgeable in matters of warfare, the number of Russian tanks has significantly. The Ukraine has asked both NATO and the European Union to provide it with combat jets. The purpose for this is to lessen the number of Russian soldiers that are present on the fronts where the fighting is still going on while air attacks are taking place. If it is possible to reduce the number of Russian forces currently present on the battlefields, the Ukraine may undertake a strong offensive in an effort to retake the territory it has. Ukraine wants to take Crimea back. The number of soldiers that are officially enlisted in the Ukrainian armed forces is steadily dropping. By regaining control of Crimea, Ukraine hopes to raise the overall strength of its armed forces. Tens of thousands of people in Crimea want to fight alongside the Ukrainian army, but any Crimean Ukrainians who try to escape and are captured face the possibility of being imprisoned. In order to stop people from traveling from Crimea into Ukraine, the Russian military stationed a huge number of soldiers along the border. ESSH, a covert resistance organization that had been founded in Crimea, began its operations alongside the Ukrainian armed forces. The covert organization that is responsible for organizing a portion of the civilian population also has posts within the Russian headquarters. If Ukraine is successful in obtaining the long-range missiles it seeks from the West, it will be able to launch attacks against these headquarters and force Russian troops to withdraw from Crimea. On the other hand, the organized people of Crimea have the ability to begin a significant struggle and bring Crimea back. Under Ukrainian control, war may last for many of years too. Experts predict that the fight could drag on for a significant number of years. If the West provides Ukraine with additional weapons and military backing, then the march of Russian forces may be halted and Ukraine can reclaim the territory that it has lost. In addition to help from the United States and the European Union, Ukraine is looking for assistance from Turkey and the countries of. If Ukraine is successful in garnering support from countries all around the world, the threat posed by Putin could be eliminated in Ukraine. If Russia invades every part of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin will pose an even larger threat to the Western European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The danger presented by China and Russia, the victory of Ukraine, could serve as an excellent model for China as well. If Russia is victorious, China's plot to attack Taiwan will not be carried out by reforming the Eastern Bloc. Russia and China hope to undermine the United States' position as the preeminent force in the region. Next news just update. Normal life goes on as usual in the streets of Moscow. People are being monitored by tourist police in Moscow. Even if policemen who are known as the tourist police are watching them, the people who are filling up restaurants and pubs in Moscow, especially on the weekends, appear to be happy. Churches of historical significance are open to the public for tours, and tourists that come to the city do so with guides. The engagement, the wedding, and the celebrations proceed as though there is no. As a result of the expulsion of numerous Western brands from the nation, the Russian adaptations of these goods started appearing on store shelves. Some nations increased their levels of trade with Russia while the conflict was ongoing. There aren't many indications that the nation is currently engaged in a conflict. Sometimes the letter Z, the site of the occupation of Ukraine, which Russia characterizes as a special military operation, may be seen prominently displayed on the facade of a building, and other times it can be seen prominently displayed on the shutter of a Western store that has ceased trading Russia's silencing opponents. It should come as no surprise that Russia is bearing the brunt of the war's severe consequences. On the other hand, the Russian government is working hard to cover up these traces. The Russians talk behind closed doors about the war that is hurting because they do not want Putin. While the number of people killed in the conflict is estimated to be in the tens of thousands, the government is using extensive repression to stifle the opposition. Opponents of the government were either jailed or forced to flee. Was given a sentence of 8.5 years in prison. Vladimir Karameza is currently awaiting trial in prison, and Alexei Navalny is still incarcerated. Protesters who opposed the war quickly found themselves fired from their employment, and performances of plays and concerts were cancelled. Those who were out in the streets demonstrating against the war were swiftly. Protesters who use the term war on their banners risk incurring large fines because it is against the law to refer to a special operation. As war, Russia began an operation directed against the activists who were protesting the war. The police made the arrests, and each of these campaigners was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Putin is censoring Russian media. In Russia, independent voices in the media have been muzzled. Hate speech directed towards the West is being broadcast on the Russian state television network. Reassuring statements that the majority of the world is on Russia's side are broadcast by Russian-backed media outlets, which are endorsed by Vladimir Putin. According to Denis Vaca, director of Russia's largest research company, Levada Center, the news produced by Russia's pro-Putin media has an effect on the people of Russia. The notion that NATO wants to destroy, or at the very least weaken, Russia has been prevalent for 3/4 of those polled for many years. Vaca said the idea that NATO wants to destroy, or at the very least weaken Russia has been. On the other side, access to social media platforms and independent news websites is restricted. It appears that a prominent radio station has been shut down, a license that allowed Dmitry Madov, laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, to publish his newspaper. Nova GTA has been revoked. Statements made by the Kremlin are made mandatory in classrooms for students. The youth are subjected to the Kremlin's particular brand of rhetoric. The month of September saw the introduction of a brand new subject to the curriculum at the school: conversations about important matters. Students in the 8th and 11th grades will study a lesson plan that discusses Russia's unique role in constructing a multipolar world. It is well knowledge that educators who refused to instruct in this class lost their jobs as a result of their refusal. The parents of kids who do not attend the class are reportedly subjected to pressure from the school administration or the police, despite the fact that attendance is not required to pass the course. On the other side, teachers often give students assignments to write letters to service members stationed overseas. It has been requested of several educational institutions that they create a hero section for former students who served in armed conflict in Ukraine. Where the sanctions against Russia effective, the Russian economy, which has been hit hard by sanctions, has done better than expected, thanks to record oil receipts of roughly $325 billion after the prices of other energy sources have been As a result of the central bank's decision to raise interest rates, the decreasing value of the ruble has been brought under control, and the currency is currently stronger against the dollar than it was before the invasion. Quite a few Western corporations, including McDonald's, IKEA, Apple, and others, have abandoned their operations in Russia. McDonald's was rebranded as Kunoik, a flavor point, while Starbucks changed their name to Stars. There is still an abundant supply of MacBooks and iPhones, and locals in Moscow claim that restaurants serve goldfish, Spanish cheese, and French wine. The international payment networks Visa and MasterCard ceased their operations in the country, but the country's banks migrated to the regional NIR system, which allowed current cards to continue to function normally in the. Those who travel to other nations typically pay with cash because the MIR system has been phased out in many countries. Following the imposition of a ban on flights from Russia by the European Union, both the cost of plane tickets and the difficulty of traveling to various locations increased. Those in affluent positions can now go overseas, which was previously IM. According to sociologists, the majority of Russians aren't affected negatively by these changes because their average monthly pay is approximately $900. In 2022, passports are held by less than one-third of the population. Putin raises salaries. As a result of the roughly 12% spike in inflation, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced new benefits for families with children, as well as a 10% boost in both pensions and the minimum wage. Sure, it is a little more expensive, but it's okay, said a Russian citizen who requested that his identity not be revealed out of concern for his safety. On the other hand, the Russian citizen claims that the war has caused widespread distress among the popul. Mobilization affected families badly. Concerns spread throughout the nation. In September, after the Kremlin issued a call for 300,000 soldiers from the reserve to report for duty, within a matter of hours, all available seats on international flights were taken and lengthy lines formed at the entry points to Russia. Immediately following the mobilization, it is thought that hundreds of thousands of people fled. The enlisted personnel at the F facilities have voiced their dissatisfaction with the substandard living conditions and the lack of equipment, according to the accounts of numerous families. Their loved ones who were deployed to the front lines without receiving adequate training or equipment were quickly killed or injured. It was so hard. I thought I was going to lose my first time since World War II that reservists have been called up for active duty. Families have been torn apart. As a result, a lady who opposed her husband's decision to serve in the military detailed the difficulty she had as a result of being forced to immediately care for her children as well as her husband's ailing mother. That was such a challenge. I was beginning to fear that I was going to go completely. The woman made her statement with the stipulation that her name would remain concealed while her legal proceedings are still continuing. She stated that her husband, who had been home on leave, had pneumonia and required psychological therapy because he was scared of any loud noise. She also mentioned that he had returned home. Many in Russia are concerned about the possibility of a new mobile. Despite these experiences, OVV, the proprietor of the survey company, noted that the general sentiment among Russians was that the war was far away and did not directly touch us in any manner. According to OVV, a large number of people were able to avoid being sent to war, while others feared that the Kremlin might announce a new mobilization. He says that he is thankful to God for the fact that we may move on with our deaths and war in the houses of families who have been told that a member of their family who served at the front has been killed. The true impact of war can be seen and felt for the first time following the sinking of the vessel, but was part of the Russian fleet. In April, the Russian mother who gave a statement described how awful the agony is for her and how she was unable to hear from her son. She states that she does not want to believe that her son has passed, but she is hesitant to reveal her name. On the other hand, photos of Putin offering consolation to a variety of military mothers are presented on television. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that there were a little more than 6,000 fatalities, while analysts from the West explain that the number is significantly greater. Putin made a vow to provide financial support to the relatives of individuals on the list of people who were killed in the fighting. It was then decided to start giving this money to families. Putin will attempt once more on February 24th. On February 24th, which marks the anniversary of the war, it is reported that Vladimir Putin will unleash a huge strike with his forces after a year in which he has had very little success. Putin may decide to launch an attack on Kiev in an effort to win back the support of the Russian. Nonetheless, the Ukrainian forces serving in the front are putting up a valiant battle. The outcome of the battle for the city of Bakhmut, which is being defended by a significant number of Ukrainian soldiers, will be decisive. Drones and howitzer fire upon Russian soldiers who are attempting to infiltrate the woodland or directly attack the city over the course of the previous day. The Ukrainian army set up an ambush for Russian soldiers who were attempting to enter the city of Bakhmut from the surrounding forest. The region was subjected to a bombardment from Ukrainian tanks and howitzers. The retreating Russian soldiers were attacked by drones that dropped bombs on them. The HIMARS missile system is made in the United States and has earned the nickname the Tank Killer due to its ability to eliminate Russian tanks. On social media, people have been sharing pictures of the numbers of Russian tanks that have been destroyed at the front. The number of Russian tanks is said to have significantly decreased. According to military specialists, the European Union and NATO have been asked to provide Ukraine with fighter jets. The rationale for this is so that there are fewer Russian soldiers stationed along the fronts where the air raids are still going. It is possible that Ukraine may launch a significant attack to retake territory that has been lost. If the number of Russian forces that are now present on the battlefields can be reduced, Ukraine seeks to regain control of Crimea every day. There are fewer people signing up to serve in the armed forces of the Ukrainian government by reclaiming Crimea. Ukraine hopes to build up its military strength to a greater. Tens of thousands of people living in Crimea are eager to fight alongside the Ukrainian army. But any Crimean Ukrainians who are caught escaping the conflict will be put behind bars to stop people from entering Ukraine from Crimea. The Russian military stationed a huge number of troops along the country's borders. It was in Crimea that the covert resistance group known as 8 launched its operate. There is a covert organization that is responsible for organizing a portion of the civilian population, and this organization shares the positions of the Russian headquarters with the Ukrainian army. If Ukraine is successful in obtaining the long-range missiles it seeks from the West, then it will be able to launch an assault on these headquarters and force Russian troops to withdraw from Crimea. On the other hand, the organized people of Crimea have the ability to begin a significant resistance, which might result in Crimea being reincorporated into Ukraine. The conflict could drag on for a good number of years. According to experts, it is possible to halt the advance of the Russian army and reclaim the territory that Ukraine has lost. If the Western nations provide Ukraine with additional weaponry and the United States of America and the European Union are not the only sources of support that Ukraine anticipates receiving. It is possible that the threat posed by Putin will be eliminated in Ukraine if Ukraine receives support from the entire world. In the event that Russia invades all part of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin will pose an even larger danger to the European Union and NATO. The threat posed by Russia and the success of Ukraine may serve as a model of excellence for China as well. If Russia comes out on top, China's plot to attack Taiwan will not go forward.